All right, my name is Miss Michelle Ramlagan. I know y'all just call teachers Miss or Sis, so that's fine. You don't need to remember the name. If you need a contact for me, 7868-1, right? 796-7733, right? All right, so y'all are either in Form 4 or 5. I probably have a handful of students who are in Form 3 because you're allowed to attend both English classes, and some people are diligent enough to do that. The topic for the Saturday class to start with this term is going to be narrative writing, creative writing. And the next big topic we will do for the term will be argumentative writing or essay writing, right? Um, if by chance you are writing in January, remember we are preparing for the June exams, but if you are writing in January, you need to keep in contact with me. And then you definitely could and should attend the Tuesday class. Tuesday class is doing something different. They are doing reports and they will do letters and possibly they might do summaries this too, right? As well as you should take a look at the summer videos if you were not here for summer, but you're trying to write in January, right? For the Form 5 students, if you're working on and Form 4s too, if you're working on SPAs, you have questions, you need assistance, you could message, you could ask questions. I'm happy to proofread sections. I will not do it for you, but I will help you understand what you have to do for the different reflections. It's the same rubric that all teachers use, a CSEC provided rubric, right? Um, so if you need help to raise the mark, because SBS, you do a piece, you're allowed to revise it and resubmit it, you could ask, right? Just message me and ask me, right? All right. If you all have any questions, you can let me know as we go. The first thing I want to do is look at a paper 2, which I had open. Right, paper 2, right? So, perhaps this will be familiar to you. I hope this is familiar to most people. This is what the CSEC English A paper 2 looks like, right? It's 2 hours and 40 minutes, plus you have 10 minutes of reading time. And these are the instructions on the front. You have 4 sections. Section A is 1 question, you have to answer it. Section B is 1 question, you have to answer it. Section 2 is 2 questions, you have to answer 1. Section D is 1 question, you have to answer it. So the only place you have a choice now is in section C, where you choose which story you want to write on, right? You have spaces in the booklet to write your answers. You are not to write any margins. They recommend that you read through the paper first, make a plan, and then write, which I think is a good idea to have in the back of your head, the argumentative essay topic at least. So as points come to you, you could jot them down. Let's look at it. So the first thing is the summary. They give you a passage. It's not usually an interesting passage, right? It's about 5, it could be more than 5. This one is 5 paragraphs, but probably sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 7, depends on the length of the paragraphs, but it's more or less this number of words. And you are expected to write 1 paragraph, right? First, you list out the 5 main points. Then you write 1 paragraph, right? Now, if you look at the answer paper, so that's for notes, and then you'll see list of 5 main points. So you have to list out those points, right? To get the content marks. Just 1 second. Right. Then you write your summary in this space, and then you add it. So you need to use back your 5 content marks, content points, and you put in a couple others, right? Not just the 5. You have to put in at least 7 to get the full content marks, potentially. The next thing you get is this section 2. So let's make, if this is the first time we're seeing this, especially for some people, it may be the first time, right? Let's jot down what is in paper 2. Right, so section A is the summary. Section B, so in this particular paper, it is write the letter, right? So it's often a letter. It could also be a report. Sometimes it's a report. It could be a notice, right? A notice about an upcoming meeting. And there's one more thing, an article. It could be an article, right? Like for a newsletter or a newspaper or so, right? And each of these formats, although generally the same, are a little bit different in the sense that they're all informative writing. They're all giving information, but they have different formats. So we will have to go through them, but this is probably term 2 will be doing this, right? Then we have section C. So we're coming up to section C now. Oh, and we can note the number of marks too, right? So section A is 50 mark, sorry, 25 marks, right? Section B is 30 marks. All right, we come to section C. This is the creative writing, narrative writing, story. People call it by different names. And your choices, you have either so it's 400 to 450 words is the longest section. The suggested time is 45 minutes. You have either a picture or a line of something that you could choose from, right? Not exactly a topic or a title, but a line to be included in the story. And these days, it's really include these sentences in the story. It's not start the story with this or end the story with this, which is a little more restrictive. Now it's write a story which includes these lines, but you could certainly start it or end it with those lines, right? All right, so this is the story. And this is 25 marks. If y'all have any questions that are occurring to you as we do this, please say. Right, last one is also 25 marks. Section D now is the essay. All right, and sometimes it's called an argumentative essay, sometimes it's called a persuasive essay. You'll notice that at the top of these pages, you have to circle which of the two of the stories you chose, right? Once you write it on that page. Right, so this section is the argumentative essay. Crime among youth is a result of co-parenting. Write an essay giving your views on this statement, right? So argumentative essay / persuasive writing. Right? Now it's typically on something that relates to young people. Often it's on something related to school. Right? And sorry about that pause. So it's argumentative essay, persuasive writing. It's usually related to something that has to do with young people or school. And then nowadays the question is formatted like give your views on the statement, not either agree or disagree, but rather give your views, which leaves it a little bit open so you can incorporate to what extent you agree and to what extent you disagree, but you still need to choose a side, right? Right. What is a notice? A notice is if there's going to be a meeting, a little paragraph that's written to advise the members of the club or the association that there will be a meeting. Basically, that's what it is, right? It follows a different format because you have to put information like who is holding the meeting and with the address and stuff as a heading. And then it's just one paragraph on the information that will be discussed in the meeting. All right. Any questions you want to ask? Anything you want to say, please do so now. I'm going to pause for a moment and give you a chance to process. Please note the things on the left if you haven't already. Right. So when it comes to paper one, those that is mostly repeats, right? And then it's a mix of grammar, spelling, comprehension. Right? So the strategy for paper one is practice as many as you can before exam time, right? Paper three, which is your SBA if you're in school, that 20%, try to get all of it. If you can get 19% of it, 18% of it, try to get all of it, right? As much of it as you could get. Which is why I will say to you, let me look at, or let me help, or let me proofread at least whatever you're drafting for your teacher for your SBA, right? If you would like to. Just try to get as many marks as you can there. And there's no reason you can't get all. Teachers are allowed to give total for SBAs. But when an examiner looks at it, it goes up to CSEC and it's moderated, it must hold up to the mark. So it must have met the criteria in the rubric. Sometimes what happens is a teacher might give it a mark, but when it gets to CSEC, the mark could be adjusted. It could be adjusted down or it could be adjusted up. We would all like if it was adjusted up and it turns out a teacher marked too hard, but a lot of times it's adjusted down. So we want to make sure we try as hard as we can with the SBA, right? I know it could be a frustrating process because you have to work as part of a group and there are always people in the group who don't pull their weight and don't do what they're supposed to. And honestly, sometimes I know it could be stressful working with English teachers. I'm one of them, right? And sometimes we don't mark things when we're supposed to, or we give feedback that you don't understand, or, all of these things. But we have to find a way to negotiate the process to get as many marks as we can. Okay, so by now everybody should be done with what they needed to write on the left. And we can move on to the actual class, right? Now, I will say one other thing. When you get your grade, you get two profiles. You get an understanding grade, which is really the paper one. So most people get an A in this without an issue, right? And then you get an expression grade. Now there is a little bit of paper two as well, like the content for the summary, the 5 marks, and some of it counts towards the understanding grade. But the expression is mainly paper two and the SBA / paper three if you're writing paper three, right? And so this is where people come up with the whole idea of a distinction, which is not a real thing. If someone has an A grade in expression and A grade in understanding, that's when they say that someone has a distinction, right? But again, that's not a real thing. That's CSEC awards. That's a thing that hyper-competitive Caribbean students came up with, right? Okay, so we're done here. Let's go to our lesson this morning, which is we're starting creative writing, right? Now, creative writing is my personally most hated topic in the whole CSEC syllabus. Does anybody else feel that way? Anybody else finds creative writing, narrative writing challenging? Or is this where you'll let off steam, and you'll have separate alter ego writer accounts and you post your fiction online and people write it and tell you how great it is, and so this is your relaxation. Let me hear from you. Do we like this topic? Do we hate this topic? Are we indifferent to this topic? Challenging, okay. Yes, okay, hate it, right, good. It's decent, boo for you. All right, good, yes, right. Now, if you are good at telling stories, if you're the type of person who can tell stories and make people laugh, then you'll probably be good at it. And some of us will hate you, right? No, I'm kidding, we won't. I'll be a little jealous. Yeah. So the word limit is really a guide. If you go over the word limit, they don't generally penalize you unless the overall thing is so terrible that they're like, well, if this person hadn't wandered away from the word limit so much, they might have stayed on point, and then they might take off a mark from organization. So I'm not suggesting you go wildly past the word limit, but I am saying it's not going to hurt your mark if you're a little bit over, like 10% over. Except in the summary, then it will hit your mark. But all these the essay and the creative writing, go to town in with any time limit that you have, right? All right, so this is our topic. Everybody has taken on the topic. We have a little game courtesy of Sir to play during the class. I don't know if anybody has played this one with him before already. You have to guess some numbers, right? And you're choosing numbers from 1 to 50. So I don't remember how much we're supposed to choose. All right, so choose a number from 1 to 50. Or choose that. Let's decide we will choose, everybody, choose 4 numbers from 1 to 50. And you could write this down in scrap somewhere. You can write it in the margin in a pencil in your notes. I'm going to choose. I'm not telling you my numbers, they're a secret. All right, how many did I say to choose? Did I say choose 5? Choose 5, right? Now, in addition to those 5, you can choose one from each of these colors if that makes you happy as an addition. So choose a number from 1 to 50, not on your list. So you can choose for the blue, choose for the purple, choose for the red, choose for the green. Right? And then we're going to hope that our number comes up later on. So I'm making a note of my blue number that I didn't already choose. I'm making a note of my purple number that I didn't already choose. My pink red number. And my green number. Right? Everybody has their numbers written down. Okay, so later on we'll come to some sides where we have to see if our number turns up in the cards, right? All right, now if you were here earlier, you saw this video, or apparently if you're a young person, you saw this video before because one of the students was telling me this is a popular video. I was looking for a short that we could look at in class, a short video, and I came across this one. Now one of the challenges we run into with storytelling and people in your age group is that, and your generation, is that y'all are used to, what do y'all watch? Y'all watch anime, y'all watch, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, K-pop dramas, y'all watch movies, y'all watch things that take a long time to tell a story in words. Right? If you think of Harry Potter movies, I don't know if you must have seen some, right? A Harry Potter movie is like 2 hours long, right? A Harry Potter novel is like 600 pages, 400 pages, hundreds and hundreds of pages, right? So we kind of tell the stories that we like to watch in the 400 words that they've given us. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. So instead, what I'm looking for are some short videos where we can get a simple story and then we could try and convey that story in the 400 words, right? So I'm going to pause the recording now, and if somebody is looking at the recording later on, what you will need to do is you'll need to go to YouTube, find this video, Snack Attack, and I put the creator's name, Eduardo Verastiki. I don't know how you pronounce his name. And you could look at it. It's about 4 minutes long, right? All right, so pause the recording. There's this idea that there are only so many stories in the world, and all the stories you read are variations of stories that have already been told, right? So I remember a long time ago, right? Reading a joke in something called a Reader's Digest. Have you all ever heard of the Reader's Digest? It used to be a popular magazine. We read everything online now. Um, it used to have a joke section. And there was this joke about a man who bought a bag of cookies. It might have been a woman. They bought a bag of cookies. They sat down in the airport waiting on their flight. And then the person next to them opened their bag of cookies and had the audacity to start eating. And so they were like, well, if you're going to take a cookie, I'm going to take a cookie. I'm going to eat my cookies. I'm going to eat them too. And then they got down to the last one. And then the person had the audacity to break the cookie in two and offer them half and eat the other half. And then when they get on the flight and they open their bag, they realize, crap, here's my unopened bag of cookies. I was actually the person stealing the cookies. Mm? So this is the same story, just told in an updated way with people, characters we might connect to, right? And when you are telling stories for CSEC, you do not need to reinvent the wheel, right? You can draw from the stories that you know and the stories that you've heard, the stories that you like. I'll give you another example. Yesterday, I went to the stationery store. 2 days ago, I went to a stationery store to get some colored foam sheets for my preschooler, right? And there's somebody in line ahead of me. He's real regaling the person behind the counter with stories of how he's supposed to be in a secondary school as a teacher. And they were talking about it. There was a video circulating with, is it a teacher being attacked by a student? I didn't watch the video. I just saw a thing from the ministry about discipline in schools. But that's what he implied in the video. But you'll probably have seen it, some of you anyway, right? And then he told a story about how that he knew someone that got into a fight with a child got into a fight with another child at school, and the victim's father went to the home of the person who started the fight and attacked his father. And he said to the child, if you hit my child again, I'll come here and beat up your dad. Does that story sound like one you've heard before? He told it as though he had witnessed it, right? He was like, I know this one time this happened, this thing I saw was blah, 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 blah. But that's from a TV show with Colin Firth. Not Colin Firth, Colin Farrell, different Colin, who played the Penguin and doesn't really act much more. He's a investigator and a very violent person, and so his child was being bullied at school. It's a TV show. I don't remember the name of the show. I don't watch the show. The clip just came up in my feed, and I watched the clip, so I remember seeing it. People take stories from popular media and repurpose them, right? So don't feel like you need to reinvent the entire wheel. The wheel has already been invented. You could just add some glitter, maybe paint it a bit, maybe change it from a 4-wheel vehicle to a 3-wheel vehicle, or a 2-wheel bicycle to a 3-wheel bicycle. I don't know, right? It's perfectly fine to draw from what you know and what you've seen and what you've heard and what you've enjoyed. Just you have to make sure it can fit in 400 words, right? All right. So we looked at snack attack. I think it's time for us to see if our numbers turn up in the witch's card. Well, when we look at the picture here, what do we see? We see shoes, and we see trees and office buildings, and the person's feet are propped up, and there's a plant. So they're probably not at home. These pants look like they have a seam in them. So they're probably at work, right? So when you're telling your story, you have to, and it's about a man. So it must be a story that involves a male character who works professionally, and he has to start off in the office and then go wherever he has to go for the rest of the story, right? That part has to be in there. Or he has to end up in the office. What? Some people got 74 and 73. Are you all cheating? I know you're not. I know you're not. Some kids are very lucky when they play these games, and I'm usually very unlucky. Okay, so let's look at the story that the student wrote, right? And if you would like to refer to it after, it would be a good idea to keep a folder with stories, whether it's an electronic folder or physical folder, with model stories that you could use to inspire you for yours, right? All right, let's see. All right. In the distance, he could see the clouds coursing lazily through the azure sky. The buildings reached up over the tallest trees, seeming to support a vast stretch of blue. The leaves of the trees and the grasses of the parks had never seemed greener. He wished that she could see it. Right? So if we look back at the picture, that's the picture the person is describing. The clouds, the tall buildings, the trees, right? Stella was their first child. They had doted on her as first-time parents are wanted to do, and had thought her the most beautiful, intelligent, beautiful, perfect baby there ever was, until his wife had noticed that she held her head strangely. It had been determined that Stella had been born blind and would never see. He had become frustrated in the subsequent months by the tears in his wife's voice as she held their baby girl staring into unseeing eyes. They were extremely rich, so that kind of accounts for the shoes and the dress pants, right? Their baby's room alone was testimony to that fact, but all their money couldn't buy what they needed most. That look of recognition, that special smile that Estella would have had only for them. There would be special schools, of course, and life would have to be structured carefully around her. He stared down at his patent leather shoes, which had been carefully buffed to a shine. They were what had attracted his wife to him, but Stella would never be able to appreciate their glow. So see, again, if we look back at the picture, the person in question has, well, she's imagining shiny shoes, right? She could have described it a different way, like the laces were tied tightly. Some sun in the background here. She could have said the shoes were scuffed, right? She could choose any way that helps her story. She could choose to define them any way that helps her story, right? But she went with shiny patent leather in order to connect to money and to bring up the fact that the baby would not be able to see the shoes, even though they were important to the mom when they met, right? Well, an important detail in their love story, not like that's what she was looking for. But anyhow, he took his feet off the window ledge. So that's a reference to the picture again. Got his things together. He wanted to go home to be with his little girl. He would often sit with her, feeding her at night in the dark, trying to imagine what the world must be like for her all alone inside a colorless void. Tears would course unchecked down his cheeks for all the dreams he had nurtured for and invested in the tiny cooing bundled in his arms. He raced up the stairs to her room and stopped in the doorway, listening for the quiet gurgle of her voice. He walked slowly, silently, to stand at the edge of the crib. She was playing with her toes. The sight of her so pink and soft filled his heart with that special warmth he had only for her, and his voice was husky and cracked as he called her name gently and touched her tiny fingers. She fought to lift her head, and a smile broke out across her face. Her hands reached out where she thought he must be. She laughed out his name, Dada, recognizing him not with her eyes, but with her heart. How come he didn't say but with her ears? Because really it's her ears that help her to know that it's him, right? But why didn't he say with her ears? Probably because it would sound more significant if he said, right, emotional appeal, good. If he said, with a heart. So sometimes when you're writing, you don't have to write things. You might know it's with her ears, but you could say heart because it gives the same idea and it sounds nicer. Writing is the time to add sauce to the story. Not if you're writing, not if you're telling a teacher what happened or a parent relaying a message from a parent to a teacher or vice versa. But in a creative writing story, that's when you could add some sauce, right? Okay, so this brings us to the last paragraph. He crushed her to him, smelling that sweet baby smell. Wasn't as it should be, he knew, but by God, for now it was enough. And when he cried not for all the dreams that lay deflated in the corners of his mind, but in joy for the one she had germinated with the rain of her smile and the sunshine of her love. Right. What do you think of this story? Which was more interesting? This one or the video? The video. Okay, no problem. That's all right. Was this interesting at all to y'all? A little bit, maybe in a different. No, okay. Right. Well, yeah. What actually happens in the story? Is there any event in the story? If something like this appeals to you, like you could appreciate that is a sweet story about somebody having a realization, then that's great because this is the kind of story that a CSEC examiner is probably looking for. Right? So in terms of the actions of the story, all that really happens is he goes from the office to home. Right? But the focus is not on physically what the events, it's more on what is going on in the character's um mindset, right? It's okay if you didn't like it, right? But what I do want you to notice that the what makes a powerful story is what is happening in the character's head, right? I mean, it also is the description of things around, but we have to have a connection to the character or the story not going to go anywhere. Even in the video, we had a connection to somebody in the video, whether it was the little old lady or even if we identify with a teenager who was misunderstood and misjudged, right? All right, so I do have a list of stories here that I'll share the PowerPoint on the website, and then if you would like to read some of the others, you can. Um, but for now, we'll just read that one, and I want to talk some more about I'm looking at time, it's 12:28. I want to talk some more about what we're looking for in a story, right? All right, so that's it. Let's do one more card. Right, so you could choose a card again. A or B or C or D. I'm gonna choose D this time. And ready? Have your numbers ready? If you choose A, here are your numbers. B, here are your numbers. C, here are your numbers. D, here are your numbers. Did any of my numbers appear? Okay, I think I got 33 and 34. And 44, sorry. So that is 77. What else? What did people get? Oh my goodness, 128 for someone? 3. Okay, I sympathize. This is usually me. $150. Wow, okay. 93. Okay. All right. The next thing I want to go through with you is some now it's some things to note about stories we are writing for CSEC, right? Now, this is not our novel that we're gonna write and get published and it will be a bestseller. It's not our online fictional story that we will release in chapters, one chapter a week, right? This is a reminder that we're writing for CSEC, right? And they are looking for specific things. So this is for CSEC stories and also for stories that have a word limit of 400 to 450 words. Right? All right, so I want you to take notes. You don't have to write down everything word for word. You could summarize the point. When we get through this slide, we can take a short break. Right? But I want to get it right and out of the way first. So, first point. In your story, there has to be some sort of problem that the character feels like he or she is facing and or like he or she needs to resolve. Right? Now, note that it's one character, one main character. So I've written the character, right? So in the story we read, it's the father trying to resolve his feelings about having a daughter who cannot see, right? And in the video we looked at, what was the problem that the old lady was trying to resolve? Perhaps it was that she was hungry and she was trying to eat something. Or perhaps it was that she was trying to um get back her own in relation to the young person stealing her cookies or what that she thought he stole her cookies. Right? If the story doesn't have an issue, if the character doesn't have a problem, right? Then the story is not going to go anywhere. All right? Okay. Next point. Why are we writing these stories? When you write a summary, you write it to get the main points and to get a shorter version of what was there before, right? When you write a letter, it's because you need to apologize, get information, complain. When you write an essay, it's because you're trying to convince somebody of something. When you write a story, though, why are we writing that story? Because you were told to? Well, I'm giving you 3 possible reasons here. You have to make the reader feel something. So just now when you all read the story with the father, some of you would have felt sad. Some of you would have felt sentimental. Some of you would have felt, oh, sorry for the situation the person was going through, right? You felt something. So the story was a success. Sometimes you read a story or you watch a story in a video and you feel amused or you feel bad for the person, you feel ashamed for the person, you feel embarrassed for them. Maybe you could feel angry. Maybe you could feel relieved. if you think about the films that you gravitate or the TV shows that you gravitate towards, right? I hate thrillers. I hate feeling scared. I hate shows that have like little confusions and twists until you have to wait for the characters to figure out what is going on. I hate those. I just want I don't like those feelings. I don't like those feelings of being confused, and I don't like those feelings of being scared. I would prefer to watch a children's movie or something with magic or something where I have a fair expectation that by the end of it, the good people will be rewarded and the bad people will be punished. Right? I'm not into dramas. So we pay attention to the feelings that you like, because probably those are the stories you're going to try to reproduce when you write, right? All right. People also read it to enjoy them. They must like what they're reading. So why would they enjoy it? They might like the character. They might like the world that you create. You might like the visuals in a video, and that's the world that's being created, right? You might like the things that they say. Like you might watch a TV show because or a web show because you like how they speak, the characters speak to each other. They have witty dialogue. They make funny jokes. You enjoy it. There's something about it that you like. So we're looking to write things that people like. And then another type of story can teach us a lesson. Now, all stories, actually, all fiction has lessons in them. Sometimes they are good lessons that, we would teach children, like you start your fables. You teach them the dog with the bone, and the dog sees his reflection in the water, and that reflection has a bigger bone, but he doesn't realize his reflection, so he lets go of his bone to try to get that bone. And the moral of the story is don't be greedy, right? So, and then sometimes there are lessons because all stories and videos have lessons. Sometimes there are lessons that we don't want passed on, but people are entertained by it. So let's say there's a movie, and at the end of the movie, the criminal gets away with it. That's still a lesson. The lesson is that sometimes bad people get away with bad things. Not necessarily one that we want to teach people, but all stories have lessons. And so you could think in your head, let me plan this story so that it will show a particular lesson, like a moral lesson, like a teaching that you want to teach somebody about something, right? So in the last, story we read, it could be that the man was taught to accept his daughter, or that the blindness doesn't have to be as much of a limitation. Well, I don't feel like he's there yet, but he might get there. And in the video, what was the lesson the old lady learned in the video? Think twice before acting on something. Okay, yes. Always watch what you're eating. Maybe. Maybe don't judge people also. Don't judge people based on what they look like. Or sometimes we can make mistakes. Or don't assume, be careful. I don't know. Any of those things, right? And I said I don't like horror, but there have been stories published as best of CSEC stories this year, and they have been horror, right? Actually, I haven't had another story for us to read involving Obia, but we probably wouldn't get to that this week. Yes, she learned that the boy man wasn't who she thought he was in the beginning. Yeah. Right. Oh, but as a caution though, I would say don't be too graphic. Think before you act. Yes. Don't be too graphic with stories for CSEC, right? You can write horror, but don't spend too much time describing violent things or graphic things, violent acts, violence in general. Right. Our stories have to be character driven. Remember, you could summarize these notes. I don't have to write everything down word for word. one character must be driving a vehicle at a time. No backseat drivers, no front seat co-pilot drivers, no. One driver, one character, right? It is very rare that a student can put in a bunch of other characters as main characters and pull that off in 400 to 450 words. Actually, I can't think of one example. There may be minor characters. You need them to do things. You could have a major antagonist, but we're only going to, meaning like, say a character is facing a bully. We are only focusing on one character's story, one character's journey, right? We could hint at the other characters, change, epiphany, whatever, but really the focus is on the one, right? Definitely not a group. Please, no groups of characters in a story. We also, in order to appreciate what is happening in the story, we need all these things. We need a setting. We need to know the background of the character's problem, right? Now, in the story we read, the person started with fluffy clouds, buildings reaching to the sky, trees, right? In the video we looked at, she was in a train station, and the train station was deserted, and there was a lost dog poster stuck up on the notice board. All of those are depressing things. One thing left in the vending machine. It's probably was your most hated day of the week, Sunday evening before you go back to school. It's probably a Sunday evening too, right? So all of these details, put the character in a setting that complements their problem. We're not going to put her in a bustling train station with energy and life when she is feeling so tired and worn out and aggravated, because the reader is going to get two contradictory sets of feelings, right? So we need a setting and we need a kind of a background to the character's problem. So the story spelled out the background about how, they had this child, they thought she was perfect, and then it turns out she was blind. And so they worried for her. And then the video only hints at the background because she looks tired, you all told me. And it was the last cookie. She looks hungry. She had to struggle to get it. So we understand she's in a place of struggle. So it's not that we're asking for a life story, but we do want an idea of how is this person going today? What is their mental state? How is it? Because that mental state is going to impact whatever happens later in the story, right? She's in a bad mood. So when she sees this person with a mohawk, she's ready to believe they're a cookie thief. All right. The events or the actions take minutes. Now, in the backstory, that could cover via sentences, right? And not in detail. Days in the past, or years in the past, or decades in the past. But what is actually happening must only take minutes. So in a video, that could have only taken 3 minutes, 5 minutes, from the time she tried to get the cookie to when she sat outside to when the train came. The whole video is 4 minutes, right? So, I mean, it could have taken 4 minutes. In the story, what happens? The backstory went on for years, at least 1 year, more than references, more than that, from when the mother first met the father, right? But we only put what we need for people to understand where we are now. So the point is, we are not going in our story to describe a series of actions or a series of events as they unfold. If you have a movie and you have 2 hours, then for sure you need to change the setting. You need to go from this place to that place to the other place, because otherwise the viewer gets bored. But in a short story that's 400 to 450 words, you cannot focus on events. You have to pick just a small section of time for events to unfold. You can't focus on too many different events, right? That makes sense? If you have questions or any disagreements, anything you want to ask, please say, right? You need vivid language to make the thing interesting, right? So if I say rain was falling, what does that mean? Does that mean a drizzle? Does that mean there was thunder rolling? There was dark clouds gathered. There was more rain than we've seen in years. Right? What does it mean? Does it mean it was just light rainfall so we could leave an umbrella home? Does it mean it was heavy so we got drenched because we left the umbrella home? Right? This is too vague. A sentence like rain was falling is too vague. Right? So we want vivid language. Your story could have a twist, but is not necessary. Right? Story we read did not have a twist. It was just a straightforward accounting of here's this issue that I'm trying to grapple with, and this is where I am right now. The video we looked at had a twist, right? Now, if you are writing a twist, for a twist to be successful, you have to put clues in, but you cannot address the twist directly, right? So for a twist, and some people will be better at this than others. So you have to experiment as a writer. If you're okay with putting in a twist and it works, great. But if you know you've done it a few times, it still sucks, don't bother, right? Like when I wrote chemistry for CSEC decades ago, we had a choice. There was a section we had a choice to choose questions, right? And throughout Form 4 and 5, like my great source of stress that I thought I revised was organic chemistry. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do the organic chemistry question because I want to show it who's boss. But I hadn't prepared enough. And so I got a 2 instead of a 1. And I will never forget that. And I will never stop resenting that organic chemistry question. Sometimes we have to know at this point in time, we could do this well or we can't do this well. And if we can't do it well, then just let's do the thing we could do well, right? So for a twist, clues must be there in retrospect without being obvious, right? So like the text message that the person was sending to his friend on the phone and messing with this old lady she's about to, right? And we might think, okay, it seems like that means he's stealing her cookies on purpose the first time we watch it. But in retrospect, he was just being calm and he was just saying she wanted a cookie and I don't mind, but I'm not gonna tell her that because she's being bold-faced about it. So I'm stressing her out, right? If when I'm writing that vision of that story for that video, I put in there that she was having a hard time because her grandchildren had stressed out, her grandchildren who look and act like the person on the bench, or maybe she had a headache, so when she sat on the bench and he was listening to loud music, it bothered her, right? That would be a clue that she was prejudging him at the end, right? So there must be clues, but it mustn't be like, little did she know that she would be the one in the wrong. That's not a clue. That's not a hint. That's an obvious solid out of the detail. All right. If you could tell a story, you could write a story. So those of you who are good at telling stories and you're telling me you can't write a story, no, you could do it. Just pretend you're telling the story to the examiner. Last one, dialogue is not necessary. We watched a whole video. It's a great story with no dialogue. Right? As you could put 10, what was the dialogue in the story we read? Wasn't it just the dada line? Where did the baby says dada? Right? So you don't have to have dialogue in the story. Okay, that was a lot of talking on my part. Let me hear from you all. Now, no, not if. This is due in 2 weeks. So it's not due next week, but the week after. So I'm going to write one. The same thing I'm giving you, I'm going to do it as an assignment too. And we will look at Mayo next week and critique it. And then, so you could still work on yours, nothing stopping you from doing that. Um, and then it will be due the following week. So let me see, what date is that? Today is the 13th. So the 27th. Right? So you're going to use this general story in the video as an idea, and you're going to write the story from her point of view. Good question. Are you writing from her internal thoughts? That is your choice. So you could pretend that you live in the little lady's head and you could use the I point of view, first person. Or you could observe her but still know what is going on and use the third person she, her point of view, right? You could add dialogue as well as you could write a story without dialogue. You could also change details. So in this case, it was a pack of cookies. If you could think of something else that that misunderstanding could have happened with, you could use that. I told you about another version of this story that I came across years ago, and it was set in an airport lounge. So instead of a train station, she could have been about to get on a flight, right? You could change things if you want to have the place be crowded and busy. Like if it was an airport, it could be crowded because there were delays, so everybody would be frustrated, right? You as well as you could condense certain things. So, if there's a piece of the video that you think you don't need to include, like maybe you don't need to include the text message, you leave that out, right? Right. So give your story a suitable name. It should be about 400 to 450 words. You're handwriting it, right? You're not typing it. So do your finger stretches. It doesn't have to be neat. You don't have to write it over after you write it the first time. You could write in pencil. If you have scratches, no problem. And then you take a clear picture and you send it by WhatsApp, right? If you need the recording, I send the link in the chat. You can access recordings and homework on that page, right? Well, what I'm going to do is link to the PowerPoint. So you could get the slide. You could get to this slide in the PowerPoint, right? Any questions, anything anybody wants to ask before we move on? Are we moving on? We're not ending yet. If you have a problem with the camera on your phone, and you don't have, like, you could use you could use your parents' phone to send it. That would be fine. Or different, but just identify yourself when you send it, right? No, I'm asking you to write it because I know some students are going to try and just generate one online. So let me see what your writing is like first, a few times. And then I'll let you type for later assignments, and then from that I'll be able to figure out who is who and what is what, right? All right. So it's just going to be the first few, and then you'll be able to go back to typing if that is easier. Okay, let's the next thing I want to touch on, the next topic I want to touch on before we end in like 5 to 10 minutes is literary devices, right? We cannot write good creative writing, good stories, unless we can use literary devices, right? So we're just gonna go over a general discussion of what they are, and from next week we will start looking at some of them individually, right? All right. So I have a little paragraph here. See what does it say? So literary devices are like a magnifying glass for your ideas, or your idea, sorry, of what something is like. They help readers to see a particular trait, and they help smaller hard to see details that are hidden stand out, right? So when you read a story, the literary device can help make something a lot more obvious. I don't have an example. All right, so do I still have this open? Yeah, let's look at this piece of writing. Nimble as a cat and smooth as a snake, Selena climbed the wooden ladder built into the side of the ship. The first guard didn't notice she was upon him until her hands were striking 2 points on his neck that sent him into unconsciousness. He slumped to the deck, and she caught him by his filthy tunic, softening his fall. Quiet as mice, quiet as the wind, quiet as the grave. What do these details tell us? What do you think this person is who snuck onto the ship? Nimble as a cat and smooth as a snake. Quiet as mice, quiet as the wind, quiet as the grave. A thief, possibly. An intruder, definitely. An assassin, for sure. Have you read the book this is from? Yes, an assassin. So these details, especially quiet as a grave. Instead of just saying Selena was an assassin, they could describe these things and you could sort of gather that she's an assassin. It's more interesting. Your brain is more interested when it has to figure things out. I just realized I have the assassin's blade written down here. So perhaps I hope you all guessed it without seeing it. All right, let's look at okay, so when we are writing, right? If we say that the sun is hot, then we have some idea of what that might mean. At some point, everybody has felt a hot sun, right? But if I say I felt like a camel in the desert at high noon, or idea, that's it. Then you get a more detailed idea that it's dry, it's the hottest part of the day, you haven't had any water to drink, it's suffering, right? So we use literary devices to sort of highlight and emphasize certain ideas that make things more interesting. Besides stories, where else will you meet literary devices for CSEC English? So in other words, why else do you have to know them? Comprehension, poems. Yeah, okay, right. The multiple choice. You'll meet it in the multiple choice. Yeah. And then the other place you will meet it, that's very important, is in your SBA. Because reflection number 2 asks you to find literary devices and discuss them, right? And if you're writing paper 3, then also the same thing. You have to find literary devices from your pieces and discuss them. And when you write something creative, because you have to write something creative, like the speech that people do for the SBA, you also will need to use literary devices, right? Okay, so let's sum up what we've did today. So today we spent the first piece of class going over the structure of paper 2, right? And then we spent a lot of time talking about what is expected for a story written for CSEC, right? You have a homework assignment that is due in 2 weeks. All right, now who won the game? Who got the most points and who will be buying us pizza when we meet eventually in real life? Anybody? I know some people were ahead of me, so it wasn't me. It's not me. Nobody wants to sleep. All right, so next week we continue with the story. We start looking in more detail at the structure of the story, character, how to develop character, what to put as, how to write about setting, and literary devices, right? So y'all have a good week. If you have any questions or concerns that come up during the week, please feel free to message.